As a child, Adele experienced human beings at their worst and at their best. It is a story that only she can tell. And so it is my honor to introduce a wonderful friend of Chapman University and of mine, Adele Stompholz.
Hello, my name is Adele Stompholz. I'm a child survivor of the Holocaust. As I look at the calendar, it validates my calculations, but it defies the passage of time. The event occurred 72 years ago. Tonight, I'm again 12 years old. Please join me in being this 12-year-old child. I'm living in the kindergarten of the Rothschild family in a foster home located in a small town in Germany. I was sent there by my family for my physical safety and the protection against the German happenings in the daily streets of the new Reich. Times have changed. Jewish children could no longer play with their old neighborhood pals without encountering a bully who has joined the Hegelian movement and would make it his duty to hassle former playmates who happen to be Jewish. Tonight is an ordinary day in the orphanage. My soulmate Kate and I have KP, which means getting the table settings ready for tonight's dinner. The dining room is spacious, bright, and uncluttered. 6 children sit on each 6 table seats, 6 children and 1 adult. The tables cluster in front of a large oblong table set for 10 adults, Dr. and Mrs. Child and their family. The oblong table sits in front of a large window that has the full width of the room's back wall. And through the window and glass, we see our playground. 2 large trees frame the backyard. Dr. and Mrs. Rothschild have not shared our meals for the last 2 weeks. They are in Jerusalem. When they are gone, some of our security is missing, especially during mealtime. We eagerly await their return, and they are our parents. Tonight, our chores are completed. Kate and I chase each other around the tables playing cat and mouse. We are inseparable. We are tiny, wearing 6-size clothes, but little and mighty and very athletic, regular tomboys. Our game of cat and mouse is interrupted by the sound of dinner chants, which coincide with the arrival of hungry, noisy classmates finding their assigned seats. The din calms down as the kitchen staff brings platters for each table. Delicious odors float about the room, while adults serve food. Seconds are always available. For a while, the sound of busy forks and knives scooping up food keep the conversation at a minimum. Once the plates are empty, the room fills with children's voices. When the decibel of the sound is above acceptable dining room atmosphere, Dr. Rothschild summons a child from way back in the distant table and whispers something in his ear. This would never fail to get our attention. All the conversation stopped, and we tried to hear what was being said to our friend. It brought total quietness to the room and big smiles to the counselors. This is a typical night in the kindergarten. Suddenly, boom! The dining room is totally dark. The outside lights are turned off. Chaos follows. Glass shatters in thunderous sounds. Tables fly through windows and doors. Kate and I grab each other by the hands and run as fast as we can to the side entrance of the dining room. We dodge adults, shouting directions we no longer hear, and we run to avoid what seems to be an invasion of strangers, big men, heavy black boots, stomping all around us. The pantry door is ajar. As one being, Kate and I fly into the free narrow space of the tiled floor. In the rear of the narrow space that is in the pantry, where mountains of canned goods and brooms and sartini supplies are stacked. trapped. Dead end, glass shattering, crackling sounds of exploding glass, darkness, and noises increasing from above. Our heads and put the beds and furniture fly through windows upstairs, crouching, eyes dilating, bodies hugging tightly together, engulfed, ground shaking, sucked in, tunnel echoes. After what seems to be an eternity, noises are abating. Now only our heavy breathing is breaking the eerie silence. Two strong, familiar arms pull us up out of the pantry, and they lead us back to the dining room. The room is enormous, totally empty of chairs, tables, and the piano, all trashed through the window and doors. It is cold, cold, cold. Kate and I, never letting go of each other, follow our counselor into the street where all the other children are waiting for us. It is November 9, 1939. Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass. That night, we slept on straw mattresses on the floor in a one-room schoolhouse, which is located a few houses away from the kinderheim. The older children are petrified and stay away all night. Kate and I are younger and feel invincible. We are having a ball jumping on the mattresses. The following morning, still days from the events of the preceding night, we walk back to our home. Lo and behold, amongst the rubbles covering our playground, I find my album and am able to collect most of the photos. They became my precious possessions. Besides the clothes on my back, they represent only my only identity of existence, proof of years past. I must admit that along the many years of my life, whenever I meet a person who is new, they had to look at my album. Within a few days, Kate, me, and my album are on our way on a train to Cologne. We are part of a small kinder transport, children's transport of 600 German Jewish children leaving their homeland. Destination, Belgium and Holland. The King of Belgium, sympathetic to the plight of the refugee children, sent an appeal to his people that they should open their hearts and homes for 3 to 6 months to shelter a refugee child. Kate and I, with a group of children, stayed in Middelburg, which is a resort town at the North Sea. It is bitter cold. All I remember from that particular place is big black heads of dead crows sticking out of the snow. It was one of the coldest winter in Europe in 1939. January 5th, 1939, I'm picked up by Miss Germaine Gossens, who with her mother lives in Brussels. They own a children's store and therefore requested wearing a child, a girl, wearing clothes no larger than size 12. She also should not meet the kosher food laws because they were unfamiliar with it. They were Catholics. I qualified on all accounts. Leaving Kate was traumatic, but only a promise that we would visit each other often calmed my anxieties. Kate was to live in Brussels as well, and to this day we remain close friends. We still keep in touch. Out of the rubbles and ashes, 2 angels became my rescuers. I called them Tom, Germaine, and Tom Marie. They were my aunties. The next year, 1940, the Germans invaded Belgium. We were made occupied till 1944. Not only did my aunties share their food with Russians with me during the war years, they nurtured my soul. The occupation years put my aunties' life in great danger as well as mine. If anyone would have denounced us to the Nazis, all 3 of us would have been deported to a concentration camp. My aunts always found solutions to any problems that arose to keep me safe. They managed to secure a fake ID card for me from the underground at great danger and high expenses. Thus, I became hidden in plain inside. When a tonsillectomy was required, our family doctor brought the ether and scalpel and performed the surgery right on our kitchen table. Hospitals were off limits for Jews. I only recall waking up to yummy ice cream while my poor aunties were just filled with fear. And ice cream was practically not available in the time of the year. In 1941, public schools were closed to Jewish children. At a great expense, my aunt was able to enter me in a Catholic private school. The dean, Madame Muladi, was well aware of my status, but allowed me to become a student. My dearest childhood friend, Annie, lives in Ghent, and I spent a summer vacation with her in our home and learned how to swim and sail. Thanks to the loving care of my aunties, I was able to grow up with some semblance of order. May 44, the war is over. We celebrated dancing in the streets for 3 full days. I hope to hear from my dad any day now. Our family living in the U.S. did not hear from him. We never did. My uncles and aunts sent a ticket for me to visit America. With the blessings of my aunties, I left on a student visa for 6 months. Who could have envisioned the future that was in store for me? 2 months after I arrived in the United States, I met and later married my beloved husband of 59 years. We returned to Brussels and my dear aunties blessed our union. I'm in trouble. Writing letters weekly, we enjoyed our loving relationship. And as long as they live. I always remain their daughter. Tanja Mann visited us many times, and she was here for the last time for my daughter Debbie's wedding. Tanja Mann was my children's grandmother. That's the only grandmother living. Thanks to Rabbi Shuwas from Temple Valley at Shalom, who initiated honoring the righteous amongst all nations. An honor to be given for people who risked their life without any pay, any remuneration, to save Jewish lives. We were able to recognize and unveil 3 plaques at the Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. Tanja Mann and John Marie for one plaque. The other one was my friends, Annie's parents, the Lanos, and Madame Muladi, who was the dean of my high school. Annie joined me to Jerusalem, and we were able to do a meeting together. It was a very sweet memory. Thanks to my righteous, I am here today. It is with great joy that I introduce to you our daughter Debbie, our daughter Yvette and Larry, our grandchildren, Yvette, our grandchildren. I cannot remember your name. Our grandchildren, and Sarah, Andrew, and Rachel, his wife. Yvette's son, our grandson, who lives in Portland, here in spirit. My life has come full circle. Dear Dr. Harron, our family members, everyone knows about your endeavors. Your yearly writing contest involving thousands of students from Southern California, as well as your own students, keep the legacy of the Holocaust alive. Thanks to your dedication and your students' involvement, never again will it come to pass. I love you, Dr.